All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today we're going to be talking about Part 5 of the Ahsoka series, Shadow Warrior. Dave, you never cease to amaze me. This is an episode of Star Wars we are going to be talking and thinking about for a very long time, and earns the title of being one of the greatest episodes of Star Wars TV that we have. It embodies everything we love and appreciate about Star Wars, facing the darkness within us, timeless lessons, music that underscores the gravity of the moments while also telling a story all its own, and in the end, an undeniable sense of uplifting hope and adventure. This episode centers around Anakin's final lesson to Ahsoka, and I hesitate to call it final because, as Anakin says, we are never too old to learn. But I say final because this is a definitive turning point in Ahsoka's arc that has been built over 15 years of storytelling. And by the end of this episode, she reaches a sort of enlightened state that us Rebels fans have been waiting for. Ahsoka the White. Now, in true Dave Filoni fashion, he leaves a lot up for interpretation. I think everyone who watches this could have a different takeaway of what Ahsoka learned and what Anakin was trying to make her realize. And as always with Dave, I think it is intentional. It puts us in the shoes of the learner, in this case, Ahsoka. Like Anakin in this episode, he can't come out and tell us what the lesson is. We and Ahsoka have to figure it out ourselves, because that's the only way we will truly grow. The titular lesson of this episode is simply put, live or die. An admittedly confusing lesson when first presented, but in true Star Wars fashion, becomes more and more clear as the training goes on. To me, Anakin is testing both Ahsoka's sense of conviction and sense of self. Is Ahsoka fighting to live or living to fight? This lesson is delivered through two flashbacks to the Clone Wars and sparring in the World Between Worlds. Before I dive in, I just want to say that Hayden's portrayal of a more Clone Wars-esque Anakin was spot on. The quips, the snarkiness, you can tell he is a fan of the Clone Wars series, and I'm so glad he got to explore this side of the character that he couldn't in the movies. Rosario and Hayden really nailed this dynamic, which I think was one of my biggest worries going into the show, but lines like, "You look old," and "This is the Clone Wars?" Yeah, no kidding, made me smile from ear to ear. So this first sparring session serves multiple purposes. One is to reestablish this relationship in a live-action setting between Ahsoka and Anakin. It also has to establish the relationship for newcomers. And I think that competitive, sarcastic dynamic between these two comes off immediately for both audiences. The final and most important purpose was to see Anakin test Ahsoka's conviction for the first time. He asks her, live or die? And she refuses to answer. She says, "I will not fight you." And Anakin replies, "I've heard that before," seemingly referencing Luke not willing to fight at the end of Return of the Jedi. But in Luke's case, he had a purpose. He was there to save his father. Ahsoka, on the other hand, isn't driven by anything anymore. She is lost. Then we dive, literally, into the first flashback, where we see a young Ahsoka and Anakin back in the Clone Wars. For new viewers, this shows that Ahsoka has been in war since she was a teenager, a true child warrior, and it's all she's ever known. For seasoned Clone Wars fans, this is a great treat for us to be back with these two during this time period, but I think this scene serves a greater purpose. I think the live-action medium actually elevates the story and content more than in animation because the visual and tonal presentation of the warfare felt much more tangible. In this portrayal, you really see how young Ahsoka was when she fought in the Clone Wars, something that in animation felt a bit more ambiguous just because of the medium itself. That is not taking away anything from Clone Wars. It expertly explored the horrors and tragedy of war and the toll it took on the characters, but by design, the show was stylized and gave a lighter tone to some of these early missions of Ahsoka and Anakin. So it was nice to see this in a new light and highlights that different mediums of storytelling have different strengths. After this introduction, we come to the true meat of this flashback. Ahsoka grieves the loss of clone lives and blames herself for their deaths. Again, this is not new for Ahsoka. In Season 1, she was put in charge of a squadron and they suffered heavy losses due to her command, and she had to come to terms with that. But I think the main point of this scene was Ahsoka accepting that Anakin did the best he could and what he thought was right given the circumstances. She's a child in a war zone. Should he joke with her? Should he be serious? He even poses the question, "What would you like me to do?" Almost implying that his hands were tied. He says, "I have to train you to fight and to survive." Anakin needed to protect her, and the best way he could do that is to train her to protect herself, to fight. Unfortunately, this installation of fighting to survive became ingrained in Ahsoka, even to this day, and subconsciously, she probably blames Anakin for this. But fighting to survive isn't living. She poses the question, what if I want to stop fighting? She is tired of it. And Anakin replies, then you die. This can be taken in two ways. Present-day Ahsoka is empty inside and doesn't have a will to live anymore, and Anakin is telling her she will physically drown and die. Or you can see this as Anakin telling her that if she stops fighting, she needs to rediscover who she is, because if all she did was define herself as a warrior, then she will be lost and dead inside. At the end of this flashback, we see a great visual of Anakin striding away and his silhouette flashing to Vader for a brief moment. This is the first time we see it in these flashbacks, and it's not the last. This transitions us to the next flashback, which really hones in on the idea of Ahsoka's perception of herself. Ahsoka talks about how all she knows is fighting and destruction, that's what her legacy is. This reveals what truly held her back from being a master to Sabine. If you feel all you can offer is pain and suffering, then why do it at all? Ahsoka is blinded by self-doubt that she forgets all of the great parts of herself. Her tunnel vision even extends to Anakin as well. He has to remind her that she is more than that. She is more than her training. And he is more than Darth Vader. This is a really tragic realization that not only does Ahsoka feel guilty for playing a role in Anakin's fall to the dark side, but she also hasn't forgiven him for what he did. Though she was happy to see her master in his old form, she still sees him as a monster. You were more powerful and dangerous than anyone realized, she said. Again, we see Anakin frustrated that she's not learning her lesson. She has to accept herself, and only then can she accept others beyond their faults. Back to the beginning, he says, I gave you a choice, live or die. Again, Ahsoka refuses to answer, and he says, wrong answer. Not choosing is as good as being dead. She lacks conviction, he says in the next transition back to the world between worlds. Ahsoka has been fighting for decades, but she hasn't been living. She doesn't so much have a death wish, but she is hollow. She does good for the galaxy and tries to look out for others, but it all seems to have been to fill a void inside her. She was living for others and not for herself. It's a somber look at this hero we have known for so long. This emptiness that she has hidden away behind the mask of a white knight. The only way to break the cycle is for Anakin to do what all great teachers do. He pushes her to her absolute limit to get her to prove to herself that she yearns to live again. With fire in her eyes, as she disarms her master, she says, live. It's a beautiful sentiment and full circle moment for this character. I absolutely love how Anakin utilizes all parts of himself, Anakin and Darth Vader, to teach this lesson to Ahsoka. It visually amplifies that he knows who he is and has accepted all parts of himself. He also knows that Darth Vader is a core reason Ahsoka is in this state, and she has to face him in that form in order to truly accept it. I think subconsciously, Ahsoka also has to acknowledge that Anakin has obtained enlightenment in this way. He has been redeemed, and if he can, then maybe so can she. In the end, Ahsoka is physically and figuratively baptized and reborn as the mythical Ahsoka the White, a version of Ahsoka seen at the end of the epilogue of Rebels, which, contrary to popular belief, may not have been recreated in this show already, and is actually yet to happen, foreshadowing future training between Sabine and Ahsoka. The next 15 to 20 minutes of this episode are an absolutely beautiful overhaul of the dark, bleak color palette the first half of the show relied on, and the score rises to new, more hopeful heights with a rare appearance of a bright piano in a Star Wars soundtrack. The light beams in on Ahsoka peacefully sleeping without her typical headdress. She's metaphorically laid bare to symbolize her rebirth. This scene recalls one of Ahsoka's most famous quotes. This is a new day, a new beginning. I give so much credit to Rosario's performance as Ahsoka has a newfound lightness to her character, like a weight has been lifted. For the remainder of the episode, there's less worry in her temperament. She is calmer, more at peace. She says she will figure out a way to Sabine. She may not know if it's the right way, but it's better than going nowhere. a true testament that she is no longer stagnant. She's going to move forward, even if she doesn't know what the path is. The end of this episode, between the color palette, the score, the sense of adventure and mysticism, lightheartedness, and overflowing sense of hope, is what makes Star Wars what it is. Through the darkness, there is light and hope for the future. Embrace it. There's absolutely nothing on Earth that can replicate the feeling of well-crafted Star Wars made with care. And these final scenes with the Purrgil are shining examples of that. I don't usually write scripts for these episodes, but in this case, with the gravity of this shift in Ahsoka's 15-year story arc that I have been on for every step of the way, and Anakin returning to give her a personally defining lesson, I felt it was only right. And to be honest, reflecting on this episode and writing this script, I got emotional a couple times throughout. Again, thank you, Dave, for preserving the beauty of what this story and galaxy is. So moving on from the training portion of the episode, I just want to highlight a couple other things I appreciated. First, you can tell Dave has thought about this for a long time. Some of these shots he pulled off are fantastic and really show his growth as a live-action director. From the shots around the spire where the star map was destroyed, to the tracking shot of Anakin and Ahsoka charging forward with the troops, the shot of Ahsoka floating underwater as the pilot rappels in to retrieve her, and of course, the several switches between Anakin and Vader. I've mentioned the score a couple times throughout this episode, but again, I want to give Kevin Kiner his flowers. The opening title card score gave me goosebumps on every inch of my body, and I can feel that he poured everything he had into this episode from start to finish. I felt like there was a beautiful accompanying score to every scene, and I cannot wait to see what else is in store for the rest of this season. Hera was a great presence in this episode, again putting her people above her rank. We even see her tap into the Force with Jason as they felt Ahsoka's presence in the world between worlds. I am sad she isn't going on this journey with us, and I'm not sure how much more we will see of her this season, but Mary's performance has been spot on to the Hera that I know. Finally, with the context of this episode and Dave Filoni's explanation of the world between worlds being a plane of existence between the cosmic force and the living force, my theory is that when you achieve the ability to become a Force ghost, you are able to freely access the world between worlds as the bridge between the living and the cosmic force. That's at least my theory, with Anakin being able to commune with Ahsoka since she was on the brink of death and existing essentially between the two worlds. I have no predictions for next week's episode besides Thrawn being introduced, but if this show can keep up the run that it's on now from this past 2 episodes, especially with the heavy focus on Sabine now that Ahsoka's arc has been addressed, this will really be something special. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I poured a lot into this, and I can't wait to hear your interpretations of this lesson that Anakin tried to teach Ahsoka, and how this landed for you if you were a Clone Wars and Rebels fan, if you were only a Clone Wars fan, or if you haven't seen either of them. How did this culmination of arc for a character that you might not have been very familiar with feel for you? Because for us, it really was, like I said, a culmination, but for you, I wonder what it felt like, and I hope it came across as very emotional and very gratifying as just a fan of Star Wars, because I think at the end of the day, this was made for Star Wars fans, no matter who you are as a Star Wars fan, no matter how much you like of the galaxy or dislike of the galaxy. If you consider yourself a Star Wars fan, I can't see many reasons why you didn't love this episode, or at least really enjoy this episode. So I'm excited to see and hear all the different reactions. I totally understand why they put this in theaters. This was truly a special moment in Star Wars. I'm glad that Dave has finally reached this level of appreciation among the fandom and outside the fandom as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. And he once again proved why he is the Padawan of George Lucas. So I cannot wait to see more stories that Dave tells this season and in the future, because Star Wars is in good hands if he is the shepherd of it moving forward. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. If you could leave a review on this podcast on whatever streaming platform you're listening to it on, I would really appreciate it. If you know people that are fans of Star Wars, family, friends, whatever, let them know about the podcast. I'm sure I've made an episode on a piece of Star Wars that they would enjoy, and hopefully they come along for the ride in the future. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at star_wars_mark of balance. We can talk on there about all things Ahsoka and Star Wars. I love hearing from you guys, so never hesitate to reach out. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.